targets in Israel, including Beersheba's Soroka hospital and direct hits on buildings in Ramat Gan and Holon in the Tel Aviv area. There are multiple injuries. This as Israel is continuing to strike Iranian nuclear and military targets, as Israel awaits to hear whether the U.S. President Donald Trump plans to have America enter the war. I'm Kalev Ben David. It is now, it's morning in New York and afternoon here in Israel. Let's get into all the major headlines you need to know about the ongoing war. We begin this hour with the latest news. Early this morning during rush hour traffic, Israel was hit by a heavy rocket barrage from Israel, resulting in several casualty events in multiple locations. There were at least 7 impact sites, with Soroka Hospital in Beersheba suffering a direct hit. The IDF identified between 20 and 30 missiles launched towards Israeli territory, and most, but not all, were intercepted. So far, at least 23 people were reported injured, 3 of those seriously. In addition to Beersheba, the other impact sites were in the Tel Aviv metropolitan area. Many of the injured were in Holon, just south of Tel Aviv. Casualties were evacuated to nearby Beilinson, Wilson, and Ichilov hospitals. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement saying, quote, "This morning, Iran's terrorist tyrants launched missiles at Soroka Hospital in Beersheba and at a civilian population in the center of the country. We will exact the full price from the tyrants in Tehran." Well, for more, let's go now to our reporter, Shosh Bedrosian. She is at the site of that Holon strike. We'll also be later going to Maayan, Hoffman there by Beersheba's Soroka Hospital. Shosh, first fill us in on the scene there in Holon.
Hey, Caleb. So you can probably hear some construction crews behind me. They're starting to really secure where this direct hit actually happened. They've been removing cars that have been significantly damaged, and they're also working to put up a fence that you might be able to see by the end of my is over actually. But we were actually just allowed inside of the site, and really the damage, it really looks like almost like a fire went through the entire thing, which it did. But you can really see the pathway of it. The ash is completely covering the floor up to the buildings. This very thick gray ash that we continue to see in all of these direct ballistic missile site hits. We do know at this point there are 4 people that are critically injured. I believe about 30 plus people that are also moderately injured at this time. And, you know, officials have said, specifically the commander of the Home Front Command has actually said it's a miracle that nobody was killed in this incident, because of one of the force of the crash, but 2, it's because everybody rushed to their shelter at the right time, and they managed to survive this horrific attack. One of the volunteers who responded to the scene told me he actually had to save and rescue at least 10 people from the rubble once they arrived here. We know that the damage to these buildings is so severe. Nearly the middle of one building collapsed, leaving the other 2 halves of it completely standing. And Caleb, we continue to report on the fact that these buildings are very old in certain cities where these ballistic missiles are hitting. In Batyan, here in Holon, we've seen other areas, and you can see the devastation because of these old buildings and where it's being hit. We also know that there is a synagogue just over inside. I'm not sure what the condition is, but at one point we saw photos of them rushing Torahs out, trying to protect them at all costs. This is just one of those situations where people are almost waiting for the next hit to happen. But I think a lot of people are also surprised that this did happen, Caleb, because over the last few days, we've seen about 5 ballistic missiles, 1 ballistic missile happen in these, these smaller barrages we've seen from Iran. But this morning, it was something else. It was between 20 and 30 ballistic missiles that came over.
Right, Shosh. And again, we should note Israel, unfortunately, the authorities just last evening released a statement saying Israel could go back to work, provided their workplaces had a shelter nearby. And perhaps no coincidence then that Iran chose to attack just at the start at the morning rush hour. This is the first time they really struck at this hour, perhaps coordinating to try to cause as much injury as it can to the civilian population here in Israel.
Sure. And I'll continue to say to that point, it might have been a blessing. You know, Iran's timing of this ballistic missile might have been a blessing because people were starting to go back to work today. So have protected spaces based on the area in which you do live in. So people were already waking up for the day. It was 7 a.m. when these sirens sounded. So people were already on their feet, starting to get dressed for the day instead of sleeping in and having a later morning. They managed to get down to these shelters in time, and because of that, these people really they escape death situations, and it's really a miracle. The magnitude of the damage here is really beyond. You know, it's different from the Bat Yam damage because Bat Yam was this very enormous high rise, 20 plus floors. You know, there's a few buildings here, Kalev, but they're devastated, they're destroyed. You can see people's belongings spread all over the place. You know, AC units coming out of the windows, all the debris on the ground. It's a tragedy. People have to restart their lives. Thousands of people across Israel are now displaced because of these ballistic missile direct hits. And you know, Israelis are continuing to hunker down, and a lot of them tell me, "Look, we're not fearful. We just have to be proactive of how to protect ourselves before something like this happens." So, because of what has happened in the last few days with other attacks, Khaled, so many people know they need to get to shelter right when they hear those sirens. There's no being lazy, there's no walking around. It is a moment where they know they need to act to save their own lives, to save their families' lives, so they can get through whatever is about to happen.
Right. And Shosh, because these attacks unquestionably were directed specifically at civilian areas and at, of course, Soroka Hospital, which we'll be going to in a minute, we're getting some very strong statements from Israeli officials. I mentioned Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu saying the tyrants of Tehran will pay a price. Defense Minister Israel Katz, who's visiting the scenes of these strikes, strong words against the Iranian regime, specifically at the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei. You get a sense this could be something of a turning point in this war.
Absolutely. And I want to say, Israel Katz was right here just a few hours ago speaking to us reporters. I believe he called the regime there a Nazi regime. Of course, very strong words for an official to be using. But like you said, these are civilian areas. I'm standing in the heart of a neighborhood. There's one high rise here. There's buildings behind me. There's all residential buildings that were destroyed during this attack as well. A man that I actually interviewed, Kalev, that everyone will be able to see on our main show broadcast later this evening. He said to me when he came out after the initial explosion happened, he saw plumes of smoke rushing towards this direction. So remember, these ballistic missiles are hitting, but there's a wave that these residents are experiencing of damage after. So once it hits, there's a depends on the direction the wind blows and the rest of the explosion happens to blow, and then it impacts, you know, whoever apartment is in that same direction. And that just happens to be the case of this one man. He said plumes of smoke, a gray smoke came through his neighborhood, just behind where the explosion actually made, when the explosion actually happened, where the direct hit actually happened. So, you know, there's a lot of debris here, a lot of cleanup, and people just wanting to live their lives. But unfortunately, there's this ongoing conflict with Iran.
All right, Shosh, I want to ask you to stay with us, but we are going to go. I want to move down now south to Beersheba because, of course, suffering a direct hit was that city's Soroka Medical Center. That's the main hospital serving Israel South. Fortunately, the wing that was hit, the surgical ward, was evacuated just yesterday, avoiding major disaster. And for more, let's go to Maayan Hoffman. And Maayan, striking a hospital like this, shocking itself. But from what we understand, this could have been much worse.
100%. As you exactly said, just the day before, they had made a decision to evacuate the specific wing that was hit by the missile. But I've been here all day and there is glass all over, you know, as I walk through the parking lots, etc. What you are seeing is just glass, you know, crumbling beneath your feet, windows that are blown out. Now, the majority of the patients had been moved to the underground facility anyway, because since Friday, all of the hospitals across the country have been operating in emergency mode. However, today I did have an interview with the state comptroller, Matanyahu Engelman, who told me that since October 7th, they've been evaluating what a gap there is in the hospitals for being able to treat patients in the event of emergency. That was long before we ever expected ballistic missiles from Iran. And so what we are finding is that there is a gap, certainly in the periphery in areas like Beersheba. Soroka Hospital is located in Israel South, and there are just simply not enough beds here on the premise.
And we should note, and I think this is an important point to make, Maayan, that this Beersheba hospital is not near any, Soroka is not near any military facilities. It has no connection to the IDF. This was a direct attack. Clearly, the hospital was the target of this attack here, you would have to assume. And this really is maybe an escalation, certainly in some ways, on the part of Iran.
Oh, 100%. I mean, I've been talking here to the heads of public health, to the heads of the hospitals, who are all saying that this was a target on Israel's most vulnerable population. In fact, because since Friday, not only did we try to discharge anybody who didn't need to be in the hospital, but we have kept in the hospitals the elderly, cancer patients, the newborn babies. That those are the people who were in this hospital time of the attack. Now, fortunately, as you mentioned, because of where the missile hit and the fact that largely everybody was underground and in safe and secure wards, there were only some minor injuries, a handful of minor injuries reported on the facility. The majority were trauma or anxiety or shock. I actually also spoke to somebody from United Hatzalah, one of the first responders in the psychotrauma unit, who was here. There's a whole team of them with dogs trying to calm down patients, again, elderly patients, very sick patients, who of course are fearful for their lives after such an attack this morning.
Soroka is a hospital that is used to dealing, has been under fire because there have been some rockets in the past from Gaza that have reached Beersheba. Of course, nothing of this magnitude that has caused this damage. The hospital is used to dealing, for example, a key hospital for dealing with casualties from the Gaza, both within Gaza military casualties, but also the civilian population. So this is a hospital that is prepared, does know how to cope with these kind of situations. Talk to us a little about how they're dealing with this situation. All right, we do have a slight delay there with Maayan Hoffman. I'm going to go to other news, but go back to Maayan if and when we can make her available. Moving on to other news, as Israel is getting hit by these Iranian missiles, it is continuing its airstrikes on Iran's key military and nuclear facilities, bombing the nuclear reactor in Arak and carrying out further attacks on the uranium enrichment facility in Natanz. But Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said this morning that in response to the Iranian missile strike on Soroka Hospital, that Israel would widen its air attacks to targets, quote, in order to remove the threats hanging over the state of Israel and to shake the regime of the Ayatollahs. Meanwhile, Israel is still waiting a decision from U.S. President Donald Trump on whether he will order a direct U.S. strike on Iran. Trump told reporters, quote, I may do it, I may not do it. The latest comments come amid growing speculation that the U.S. could be on the verge of joining the Israel offensive, possibly with an airstrike on the heavily fortified nuclear facility at Fordo. Trump said, quote, nobody knows what I am going to do, adding, it's not too late for Iran to give up its nuclear program. But the U.S. president also said it is very late to be talking. We may meet, but referring to the Israeli strikes on Iran, Trump added, there is a big difference between now and a week ago. Trump said, what I want now is Iran's unconditional surrender. Now, this comes as Israel is widening its attack on Iranian facilities, in nuclear facilities in Iran. Now, over the past 24 hours, 60 fighter jets were involved in waves of attacks against sites in Tehran that are connected with the regime's nuclear weapons project and missile production sites. Those sites hit included centrifuge production and research and development sites for the nuclear weapons project. The IDF says that more than 1,100 sites have been hit in Iran since the start of operations a week ago. Among the latest sites targeted, the Air Force hit to the Tehran police headquarters. Defense Minister Israel Katz saying this building housed the Iranian regime's internal security, the main arm of the Ayatollah dictator's oppression. Israeli officials have said they would welcome regime change in Iran, but that is not the purpose of the offensive designed to take out its nuclear program and military capabilities. Iran today is also blaming Israel for the hacking of an Iranian state TV broadcast. In that broadcast, it is calling for an uprising by the Iranian population against the regime. The footage shows Iranian women protesting and calling for the removal of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Meanwhile, evacuation efforts are underway to remove more Israelis, more American citizens living in Israel, along with the foreign nationals of other countries. These include Australians, Europeans who are starting to make their way out of the war zone. The U.S. ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee, posted an urgent message on social media yesterday, saying the embassy is working on evacuation flights and cruise ship departures for American citizens who want to leave Israel. Huckabee urged anyone seeking to help to register immediately with the U.S. State Department's Smart Travel Enrollment Program. Well, joining us now is Israel's former ambassador to the U.S. and former deputy foreign minister of Israel, Danny Ayalon. Mr. Ambassador, thank you for joining us. Danny, first of all, rough morning for the Israeli home front. I think you're there in Hod Sharon, which is received multiple sirens, of course. But let's start with the U.S., of which you're which you are certainly an expert on. The big question: will the Trump administration, will President Donald Trump join the Israeli war effort against Iran? What's your assessment at this time?
Well, Kalev, as time unfolds, it seems like we are coming closer to a positive decision by President Trump to join Israel in the very important task of eliminating the illegal infrastructure of Iran's nuclear program. And I believe the U.S. can have a great contribution. Certainly, the risk for the U.S. has lessened dramatically after Israel paved the way pretty much to the skies of Tehran and indeed the entire territory of Iran by eliminating all their defense control and air defense and others. We have done so far a phenomenal job in hitting all the crucial elements of their program and also of ballistic missile sites and factories of manufacturing them. But there is one issue of Fordo, which is the last or the remaining site that was not taken care of because it is deep down, actually buried in a mountain, and for that Israel does not have the munitions or the platforms to carry them, namely the B-52 or B-50 or B-2. And in this case, I believe the U.S. could be a great assistance and also serving none other than the U.S. interest itself.
Because there is debate within the United States, even within, as we know, within the U.S. administration, certainly within President Trump's own Republican Party. As he makes this decision, what are the factors weighing on President Trump, both for and against this really could be monumental decision, whether or not to join Israel in the war against Iran?
Well, quite frankly, Kalev, I don't see any negativity from a national interest of the United States. So all those who are against it are citing mostly political considerations because, how would the base take it? And the entire isolationist movement has never worked for the national interest of the United States or for security interests, because if the United States does not eliminate threats far away from the US, they can just come into the US closer and closer. So all those who are against it, just for the principle of being isolationist or concentrate on America first, well, America first is not only domestically, but also globally, certainly when there are imminent threats to the US from the far out of the territory of the US.
Right. Now, if as you mentioned, the U.S. certainly has the military capability to change the battlefield significantly. For example, taking out that plant on Fordo, which would no doubt hasten perhaps the end of this war. Let's talk diplomatically. What would it mean for the region? Perhaps even moving forward, moving even beyond the war, if the U.S. were to decisively involve itself in the conflict, because presumably that would really only be the first step towards maybe some of the greater plans that would fit in with President Trump's greater vision for the Middle East.
Yes, Caleb, I think the entire region will show great deal of gratitude to the President Trump and the United States, because they are keeping them safe here. And this will certainly contribute to the dominance and leadership of the United States here. I think also the confidence and trust in the United States also will build up to levels that have never been there before. And if we look to the global interest of the United States, this will diminish China and Russia's influence. So I think from all perspectives, I believe from the United States interest, again, national interest of the United States, security, strategic, I would say that the US would benefit from doing it. And now it's the time to join Israel, and again, with minimum risk to the United States.
Right. And Danny, referring back to this morning's strikes, terrible strikes there in Ramat Gan, not so far from where you are, in Holon, Soroka Hospital in Beersheba. These are all civilian areas, not close to any military bases or installations. Clearly, Iran upping the ante in attack in effort by particularly striking civilians targets specifically. We're hearing strong words from Prime Minister Netanyahu and Israeli Defense Minister Katz, perhaps hinting now, not saying it outright, that, for example, the leadership of not just the military leadership, but the overall leadership of Iran could be targeted. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei. Now, you've been at the top levels of Israeli government. I'm sure you've been in on debates, discussions about whether Israel should target what we might think of as political figures. That may be a misnomer here. What's your view on this as the government is weighing whether, for example, it would really target, for example, Ayatollah Khamenei?
Yes, Caleb. Well, it takes a real intensive and thought out process, decision-making process, because when it comes to leaders, political leaders of a state, a member of the UN, there are quite ramifications to it from the legal point of view. However, since we see, and certainly following what you mentioned, the bombardment of civilians, hospitals here in Israel indiscriminately, certainly it renders this entire political echelon in Iran as a terrorist group. So I don't think that their fate should be different than of Nasrallah and Sinwar from Hamas and Hezbollah. So in that case, I believe that should be on the table. I'm not sure the decision has been made, but it certainly is a possibility. And of course, it is to separate that from a regime change, because the regime change is only up to the Iranian people to do.
Right. I want to go back to your comments saying that other countries in the region, maybe not vocally coming out in support of Israel, but we see them only issuing, I would call them pro forma condemnations of Israel's strike on Iran. We see none of the countries threatening to, I'm talking about those Arab countries that Israel has relations, Jordan, Egypt, of course, the Abraham Accord countries threatening to break relations with Israel. We see none of the kind of really serious condemnations more relevant to the Gaza conflict. So let's talk about that as a diplomat, the reaction of Israel's Arab neighbors to the Israeli offensive against Iran.
Seems to me that it's mostly a lip service because the bringing down the Ayatollahs, let's say, or certainly taking out the threats from Iran on all these three matters. One is the nuclear one. Secondly, is the terrorists, as they are the subversion entity throughout the region against the regimes of all those Gulf countries. And thirdly, their long-range ballistic missiles. All this is a direct threat to all the Gulf countries, to the entire Middle East, and much beyond, actually, to all the Sunni countries. So they would be a great benefactors of the taking this threat or this triple, I would say, triple facet threat from them. Will stabilize the region, will allow a real prosperity in the region, so they could only benefit from that. Of course, they have to pay their lip service as a solidarity to another Muslim country, albeit it's a Shia and not Sunni, and there is a great difference between them.
Now, Danny, there is, of course, the actual battlefield in the skies above Iran, but also there are the diplomatic, you might say, arena, which you just spoke about. There's also the area of what we call public diplomacy, of international public opinion. You certainly had a lot of experience during the years in the foreign ministry, but I've also seen you taking part in discussions and interviews in international media over the past week. What is your assessment of how Israel is faring, on a sense, in that battlefield?
Well, I would say remarkably well in the countries that are important to us. Of course, the United States, we see in the United States there is an overwhelming support for Israel, and also overwhelming support of eliminating all the Iranian threats, including participation of the United States in Europe, especially in the major countries of Europe, namely the United Kingdom, France, and Germany. We see great support. Also, we see that the governments, especially the government of Germany, the chancellor, who mentioned that the Iranian nuclear program should be taken out, and he also commended Israel for doing what he called doing the dirty work for the entire world. And basically, this is also a relief for Europe and the European countries, as already the ballistic missiles of Iran can cover the entire territory of Europe.
All right, Ambassador Danny Ayalon, thank you so much for joining us today on ILTV.
My pleasure, Khaled.
Moving on. Now, over the years, as Israel has faced situations of war and other crises, Diaspora Jury has come to the aid of the Jewish state. Now, one of the organizations that has traditionally led that effort is the Jewish National Fund. Joining us now from New York with more on that is Russell Robertson, CEO of the Jewish National Fund USA. Russell, thank you for joining us. And the Jewish National Fund, again, coming to the effort. Maybe start by talking specifically about some specific initiatives that the Jewish National Fund USA has been implemented on the ground in Israel since this conflict began.
Well, I think that there's the reality that during this crisis we found that we are one. We sort of talk about it all the time, but when we have October 7th, when we've had today, it truly has shown how the American Jewish community, how the community across America has come to be one with the people of Israel. So first, we're not forgetting the hostages. every single day, our people are posting, our people are writing to congressmen and senators. We are making sure that the story of the hostages that are sitting in Gaza today will come home now. And that is something that's very important to us. But you should know that when this happened, we were already mobilizing through all of our affiliates throughout Israel. So we had programs for children that were starting up within 1-2 days. Our young people that are part of our Makom organizations across Israel were providing programs for young people, for elderly, for families, for making home calls. We just sadly, Soroka Hospital was hit, but the rehabilitation hospital at Ade Negev, one of our main affiliates down in the Negev, is already handling the patients from the rehabilitation hospital from Soroka to Adi Negev. I want you to understand how the world even changes so quickly. Mitzpeh Ramon, Ramat HaNegev, Israel Envelope, Kiryat Shemona, they are hosting families. Listen to this. Hosting families today that come from the center of the country. Can you imagine? A week and a half, 2 weeks ago, 18 months ago, these people were being hosted by the center of the country. And now, Kiryat Shemona, Ramat HaNegev, Mitzpeh Ramon, Yoracham, those communities are hosting those families in their homes. And we're providing them with the assets, the opportunity, the needs that they're going to have within their community. And I'll just tell you, we have a Lauder Employment Center. We're helping all the small businesses throughout the North and the South, trying to figure out how to pivot during this situation. And we have a program that you could go online at jnf.org, and you could buy packages that will be delivered to people's homes and soldiers that you don't have to know them, they'll know you. But those packages are packages of merchandise that is being purchased by small businesses in the North and the South. So you get to do a double mitzvah.
Right. You know, Russell, I think one of the consequences, unfortunately, of this conflict is it's wakened in the Israeli public the real need for example, bomb shelters in every Israeli community. And I know the Jewish National Fund USA has been involved in, for example, the effort to build more bomb shelters and better in the Gaza envelope community, which has known this kind of, unfortunately, this kind of war situation for years now. Maybe talk a bit about that, because that's something that really could be perhaps extended to other parts of Israel. We're just realizing how much something like that is needed.
So the bomb shelters, you're exactly right. And sadly, many of those bomb shelters in which we painted and we made them children-friendly looking were the ones that were all on TV during the Nova Festival, where people were slaughtered. But we are providing more bomb shelters down the OTF. Matter of fact, going under construction today in the Eshkol region are 800 safe rooms that we're building. 800 safe rooms for people who did not have safe rooms in their homes. In the north, we have been providing them since October 7th as well. We have to speed it up. We have to get more opportunities. We're working together with the government, but it has to happen in the north and the south. And those bomb shelters go down to the Israel envelope. That's where children are sleeping today. Sadly, that's where children are having school today. Sadly. But those bomb shelters are really a shelter of not just from the bombs. It's about the shelter of giving them some sort of normalcy, if you would, during this time. And to have 800 of them being built right now down in the Israel envelope, and we're going to start another 800 just months away, we are providing that kind of shield for safety. But a big project that we're working on, and we're building 15 of them, we are taking the fire department, the rescue services, the medical services, and the security services, and we're building emergency response centers. One big building that will house all your security system, your fire truck, your ambulance, your medical service, all in one building, so that what happened in October 7th when you didn't have command and control in the different areas, we are building 15 emergency response centers just in the Israel envelope, going to change the entire dynamic, but also give those people who are coming home, and 89% have returned. Those people are coming home. We can't do the work of the IDF, right, but we're sure going to do the work to give them the feeling of security when they are home.
Right. And I have to say, better to be in those bomb shelters than you see these pictures of people running into subway stations in the Tel Aviv area. I just want to go further, you talked about some of these great projects. How can people, for example, in the United States, support the Jewish National Fund USA program? I think a lot of people still have the image of the little metal blue and white boxes and putting coins in. So what is the way that people can, particularly in the U.S., support some of these great initiatives you're talking about?
So first, I always say that those little blue boxes were major gift opportunities at the time. People taking literally coins off
Oh,
of
sure.
that would take food off of their plate. So go to jnf.org, call 1-800-542-8733, 1-800-542-8733, jnf.org. You could you could send one of the packages and help small businesses and get delivered to a family who needs it here in Israel. By the way, we have our Alexander Muss High School in Israel. I want you to understand, we have over almost 40 teenagers, 16 years old, who've been stuck in Israel. The teenagers are having a great time. The parents are a little stressed. We're going to be getting them out of Israel, but not only out of Israel. We are committed that this August, we're going to bring another 200 teenagers back to Israel. And starting in September, another 1,700 teenagers, because we are rebuilding, re-engaging, and reimagining Zionism and bringing it as a connection of our Jewish people, Israel as the great unifier for all of the Jewish people everywhere.
Well, Russell, let me ask you, because as you know, from your role in the Jewish National Fund USA, you're one of the leaders of the diaspora community there in the United States, which is going through its own stressful period right now itself. I just maybe talk a bit about, in general, about how you see the Jewish community there in the U.S. reacting to the events that we've had here in Israel over the past week. As I said before, at a time when it's dealing certainly with its own issues, domestic issues there in the U.S. as well.
So I think that this is a great story about the preparedness of, and you could underestimate the Israeli army, and I think we saw it happening. You could underestimate the diaspora Jewry. So diaspora Jewry, people like to write a lot of articles about this issue and that issue. I'm going to tell you, these are the realities. Our fastest growing part of our donor demographic is our 22 to 40-year-olds. I was telling about our high school in Israel. We are going to be up to pre-October 7th numbers starting in January. And then we're going to extend that on to 5,000 teenagers coming for 16 to 18 weeks to Israel for a semester abroad. But I'm giving you those small examples because, people love writing negativity and people like talking about all the issues that everybody is having. But I'm going to tell you, Israel, the connection, Zionism, is the strength of our American Jewish community. The American Jewish community is a strength for Israel. And these times are the wake-up calls for us. And I think that our wake-up call is, you know what? We have 3,500 years of winning seasons and some bad games, but some great winning seasons. And we got to just talk to our young people and our people and engage them. And I'll just tell you a story that's even happening tonight. Sure. At the Jewish National Fund, we are hosting a group of Israelis who are stuck in New York for a barbecue. Why? We don't know them. They don't know us, but we do know each other.
Right. Well, the Jewish National Fund, from even before the state was established, and the Jewish National Fund USA helping Israel, I have to say, unfortunately, at times of war, but also at times for peace and other projects. Russell Robinson, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you very much, and thank you for being who you are, because you have been bringing the story, the real story of Israel, to so many people. So thank you.
All right, thanks for joining us. Now, as we have been reporting, it has been a tough day for the Israeli home front with these rocket attacks on civilian areas throughout the country. So how is the civilian population in Israel coping with the terror, with the stress, with the isolation of the past week? And how can it cope better with that? Well, for more on that, we are joined from Jerusalem by Dr. Kamila Forkosh-Lavan. She is a practicing psychologist. And Kamila, I used to speak to you in the days with COVID when people were dealing with the isolation. In some ways, I almost feel this past week has been a return to that, people stuck in their homes for much of the past week. But added on to this, of course, is that terror that even in your own home, you're not safe. So talk about the stress
Yeah.
that this has for the Israeli population.
As always, it's really nice to see you. And unfortunately, under these circumstances, hopefully we're going to be reporting on something happy and, in the near future. But yes, it does have a little bit of or a lot of a throwback to Corona. And in a way, I mean, nobody would want this on purpose, yes, but in a way, it's a good experience if we take it in terms of learning experience and the learning curve that we have had Corona, and we're also, unfortunately, one of the most experienced, so to speak, countries being in war. Yeah. So on one hand, our PTSD level as a country is one of the highest. On the other hand, we really good at getting up in the morning and making that omelet, right? So this is one of those moments of like try to, even though it sounds crazy, but try to remember self-care as much as possible, meaning this shall pass too, but in the meantime, to try to keep sane as much as possible. So do self-care, sleep during the day, because obviously one of the reasons, of course, it's also a psychological attack, that the attacks are happening in the evening and in the middle of the night. That's not by chance. So do try to sleep during the day as much as you can. Put away anything that is not something that's very important and urgent right now. Don't do it, triage. And especially if you're parents, to the children, because they're watching you as well.
Right. Well, let's talk about children, because the schools have been canceled. We don't know, even though there was a directive for people that enabled people to go back to work if there's a shelter, but that may have been a bit hasty given what we saw this morning. But schools are still not back. So what can people do to deal with having those children at home and having to bring them down to these shelters at all hours of the night?
So again, make sure, first of all, that again, as in triage, like really functional, right? The situation is horrible. Try to limit as much as possible the news and things that are stressing you out more, because it's already a very stressful situation. Try to do something that also gives you a peace of mind as a parent, meaning if you're more balanced, your children will feed off of that and they will be more relaxed as well. Otherwise, it's just a snowballing effect of everyone's crying and screaming and very frustrated when the situation is already frustrated. So have also games, have books, have coloring paper, things that are very easy and simple to take, just literally pencils and a notebook, something that you can grab easily, but will also entertain the children, and they will be, doing something while they are there closed in. And also try to be as calm as you can yourself, meaning if you need to cry and have a little nervous breakdown somewhere in a corner, that is something that you should also allow yourself to have, whatever that might mean for everyone individually. But when you are with children, do talk, about the stress and ask them how they're feeling, but don't try not to put your stress on them for support, especially, be age appropriate, because this is something that might affect them, and in a way it will affect them for the future, and it will do so more if the parent is more stressed, if that makes sense. So try to keep as sane as calm as you can. Do something funny if you can. Watch some TikTok. This is the time. Do whatever. Play dirty. Do anything that you can to keep yourself sane and stable. Nekuda.
Right. Okay. So that is in the whole, in terms of families and homes. Let's talk a little about the authorities, the government. It's a difficult situation because, unlike, say, COVID, where there was perhaps some preparation time for the authorities to deal with what was coming, because this was a surprise attack. The government really did not prepare the population in any way for this. How have they been doing? Is there more the authorities could be doing just to deal with this? Certainly there's more they could be doing in terms of, bomb shelters and that kind of thing. But in terms of dealing with, for example, the stress, the psychological toll on Israelis.
I would recommend, first of all, they are doing already a lot. We can see, and I'm sure a lot of things we don't know what are happening behind the scenes, but I would highly, highly recommend to scramble as much as you can, develop some programming in terms of education for self-care, and what do you do with children, and how do you set up, your home environment to work, or to, grab a book, even though you can't concentrate on the book right now so easily, or again, watch something nice. Be sure to give those messages and normalize the situation that is completely crazy, meaning it makes sense that people are stressed. It's okay that you're stressed. It's okay that there's difficulty sleeping. Sleep when you can. If you have extra dirty dishes, forget the dishes. Dishes are going to be there when you come back. You're going to wash them. Do whatever you need to do just for the moment. And I think it's very important that some of that programming for self-care and how to function during this time, even if it's short little videos, would be very, very important, because a lot of people just don't know. And maybe even some of us do know, but it's good if someone reminds us from the outside, because when a person is on survival, sometimes that's the last thing that they're thinking of is care. And exactly that's the time when you need to think of self-care even more, when it's so stressful, so that you come out on the other side as sane as you can and as balanced as you can. And of course, more healing will need to take place and therapy will need to take place. But again, I'm going back to, especially if you're a parent to children, because they are watching you, and how you are will affect them very, very much as well. They're reading you all the time.
Kamila, one last question. There are, at ILTV, of course, we have many viewers abroad who have relatives and friends in Israel, and even those that don't have strongly, identify with Israel, and maybe are themselves. I hear from people abroad, they're stressed by seeing what is happening in this country. What word do you have for those people abroad about how to deal with just the news that they're getting every day, and maybe their feelings of kind of frustration that they're not even in some way part of it?
Brilliant question, as always. I really, again, thank you so much for bringing in these kinds of topics to begin with and asking these kinds of questions. They're very, very astute. So as you know, I work internationally, and there are many clients that do exactly what you're saying. Some live abroad, some have relatives here, some lived here and moved there, some got stuck in the middle of all kinds of countries on the way back. So it's very important. Also, I'm reaching out right now in part to also educators within different countries, within different communities. Be very sensitive in how you're speaking. This is also from feedback from clients, yes? How you're speaking to children, how you're addressing the community, how you're addressing the Israeli community that lives within different countries, including US. The needs might be a little bit different. There's often an assumption that Israelis just aren't as sensitive or don't care as much, because they're so used to managing the stress and hiding their feelings in a way, and pretending like everything's okay. And then often they even believe that it's okay, even when it's not okay, right? So no, someone throwing at you bombs or being scared of you being stabbed for years on end is not okay, but it's being diminished as though it is. And there is a sense of embarrassment almost for being a Jew, or it's a political statement just to say that I'm a Jew, right? So there is a lack of support and a huge confusion within the community itself. So I think it's very important that first of all, for educators and for community leaders to get as much education on the topic. Don't be embarrassed to be like, I don't know, what do I do? How do I do this? It's very important. And for families, do keep in touch, and also try to keep your stress to yourself to a degree, meaning don't now stress out more the people that are already in Israel and stressed out anyway. Of course, you want to know what's happening, ask what's happening, but also get yourself educated in terms of news and things like that. But then also try to be there as a support, not as a stress factor. Right. And then also talk to somebody, reach out to somebody. This is the time to reach out for support to whoever it is there within your community, within your circle of friends that is going to hold you. Definitely.
All right. We have to all
and
take
sleep.
care of and sleep. Yes, when you can here.
When
But
you
we all
can.
have to. We have to all take care of our mental health. Dr. Kamila Forkosh-Lavan, thank you for joining us on ILTV.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Stay safe.
All right, I want to see if we can go back now to our Maayan Hoffman down in Beersheba and Soroka Hospital. We'll go back to our Shosh Bedrosian in a moment. But Maayan, let's just update us on the situation there in Beersheba, where there was a direct hit on Soroka Hospital this morning.
100%. So the majority of the patients who are unable to be relocated underground have already been evacuated or are being evacuated. I've been watching members of the Home Front Commands and Magen David Adom, our national response team, coming here and taking people in ambulances. Many of them were relocated to hospitals in Ashkelon, in Ashdod. Some of them even went to Sheba Medical Center up in Tel Shomer in order to ensure their safety while the hospital is being evaluated and while they see what kind of beds can be made available.
And just the sense of Beersheba, maybe as a greater community, as one that has not had experienced this kind of direct attack, and maybe was unfortunately thinking that they would be spared this attack. The impact something like this has on that community, which has, we should note, of course, has had attacks from Gaza, serious rocket attacks over the past years.
Of course, I mean, Beersheba is towards the western western Negev area. It's on its way down to southern Israel, and certainly on the October 7th in the aftermath, Soroka is one of the key hospitals. It's the only tier 1 trauma facility in the area, so it is used to treating extremely acute patients. A direct missile attack has not ever happened at the hospital, despite, as you mentioned, Hamas rockets, which of course have been coming into the area since 2007. But you also have to remember that the rocket heads, the warheads on those rockets coming in from Hezbollah and Hamas are very different than what we see from a ballistic missile from Iran. It's a much more deadly hit. As I walked around the hospital today, there is glass all over the grounds, not only in the buildings that were directly hit, windows were blown out. Patients are suffering from trauma. I spoke to one of the United Hatzalah first responders in the psychotrauma unit who shared about it being her backyard, and she rushed here today with her dog in order to bring some solace to some of the patients who are struggling more than anything with shock and anxiety around the situation that happened here today.
All right, certainly a very difficult morning for the people in Beersheba. But as we said, we should just maybe give thanks. Almost would describe it as a miracle that there were not more serious casualties down when that rocket struck directly at Soroka Hospital. Maayan Hoffman, thank you for that. I want to go back now. I want to go back now to our Shosh Bedrosian there in Holon. And Shosh, update us on the cleanup effort there in Holon. Unfortunately, as we know, there were some more serious injuries there in that Holon strike. Probably the worst of the several sites hit this morning. Probably the Holon would have been maybe the worst impacted of all of them.
Yeah, I would say this is probably the worst one of the day in terms of the amount of damage, but also in terms of the amount of people injured. Right now, we're learning that 4 people are critically injured, about 20 plus are in stable condition. In addition, like I said before, the search and rescue is actually over here, which is a great sign. There's actually no crews really inside of where the damage is. It's just trying to make sure that there is a cleanup happening outside in the parking lots where there's broken glass and there's vehicles that are absolutely destroyed. So it's a positive thing that search and rescue crews are not there, of course. But we continue to say the debris, the devastation is enormous here, and it is really catastrophic. No one will be able to return to their homes here. Of course, they will not be. There is one visual that is just stuck in my head, Kalev, from this scene here. Of course, it is the building that collapsed in the middle. You have an entire building standing, except the middle portion of it falls to the ground. It just shows you the toll it's taking on these older buildings, this older infrastructure that is located in some of these central Israeli cities is really affecting the aftermath of what is happening when an Iranian ballistic missile happens and hits and makes direct impact with property here. This is the result of it. You know, I was just hearing a report, Kalev, and I don't know if it's been verified yet, but it's possible that one of the Iranian ballistic missiles had several warheads on it, which just shows you the way in which manufacture these type of this infrastructure. I don't know if that's been confirmed yet, but if that's the case, you know, my question is, do any analysts or of course the Israeli, the IDF, is how do you combat something like that? Is the system built strong enough to, you know, intercept more of these types of missiles? And if so, what other types of damage could we see in the future? Because Kalev, we know at least 20, if not more than 30 ballistic missiles were actually fired into Israel last night. So what will happen tonight? A lot of people, of course, they're worried strikes will happen tonight and could be even worse than what happened today.
Been a lot of speculation about whether the Israel's air defenses were prepared with all kinds of threats. But of course, we don't know factually on that. And we were told right from the beginning that these air defense systems are not hermetic, that some of these rockets, missiles would get through. And I think what's taken Israelis by surprise is they were not used to the level of devastation that just one missile could have in this kind of instance. Now, where these attacks were directed specifically against civilian targets today, there in Holon, Ramat Gan, or specifically in the Soroka hospital in Beersheba. So we're hearing some very strong words from Israeli officials. Prime Minister Netanyahu releasing a statement saying the tyrants of Tehran will pay a price for this. I know you had Defense Minister Israel Katz there earlier today. Some very strong words from him. Let's talk about that. Maybe a new type of warning toward Iran.
The remarks from Defense Minister Israel Katz have been very, very strong from the beginning. We mentioned before Kalev, and just as you could fact check me on this, that he even compared the Iranian regime to the Nazi regime after today's events, of course, because Maayan made a great point that targeting Beersheba Hospital is targeting the weakest, targeting the most vulnerable inside of Israel at a hospital. Just the other day, I was reporting from Bnei Brak, another central Israeli city, a direct missile hit as well. It hit directly a school that serves children with disabilities in the community. 300 kids go to that school. So it's not just targeting residential buildings, it's targeting schools, it's targeting hospitals. It's gone beyond a new level. It's been 7 days since Israel first launched attacks on Iran in regards to their nuclear facilities. And of course, Iran will say this is retaliatory strikes, but this is not on any type of military infrastructure. These are homes where children live in. I witnessed, I saw today with my own eyes, I captured it over video, Kalev, a baby being rescued in Ramat Gan at that impacted site.
Wow.
He was reunited with his mother by United Hatzalah volunteers. I captured the whole thing. And you see these moments in real time and you really can't believe that it's happening. You're just going with it. And then you watch the video after and you're like, it's hard, it's time to process what just happened. And so, you see these scenes of people in their most fight or flight moments with adrenaline, saving lives, their lives being saved, acting in ways to save anything, their loved ones, their well-beings. And this is the outcome of what happens when Iran is targeting residential areas.
No, it's really tragic scenes this morning across Israel there with these Iranian attacks on the civilian population. Shosh Bedrosian there in Holon. Yes, Shosh.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay.
I thought we were having some type of sirens come through, but it looks like we are in the. It might have been a malfunction of the app, but we're on high alert as always, Kalev.
Right. I'm not seeing anything right at the moment, Shosh. We'll follow that if necessary. Shosh, thank you for that. Now, earlier, Shosh Bedrosian did speak to a worker from Magen David Adom, Israel's Emergency Medical Rescue Services, MADA, and he had this to say about the scene there in Holon.
A few minutes afterwards, maybe 1 or 2 minutes afterwards, we started hearing the gigantic.
All right, so I'll pick up after
sounds. So we left our station even before the 10 minutes, of course, were passed. We came on scene. As you can see here, we have a complex around 5 buildings. Here you can see the main one in the middle is probably the one that got hit the most. We start triaging. Some of the buildings and cars are still on fire when we arrive, of course. We start trying to extract the patients, whoever is possible. Some are still under the rubble, so it's a little bit more difficult. But we start treating, transporting, extracting as much as we can. We have to take into consideration that you never know when the next missile will be, when the next red alert will be. So we want to get people evacuated as fast as possible. In addition to us, of course, Homefront Command, Fire Department come help us try to extract those who are on the higher floors, maybe. and are still under the rubble.
Did most people end up in their miklat in the basement here?
Yeah, so in these buildings here, they're a little bit more older than the rest of the area. So the safe rooms are on the bottom floor. That's how I was told by one of the patients that I treated and transported. So luckily, even those who were injured or on their way down and didn't make it in time, they were still on the bottom floors. So it was way easier for us to extract them for this level floor, maybe first floor.
How many people are injured at this time?
So I can't give you the exact number, of course, but we have a relatively low amount of injured and casualties. We don't have any that I know of casualties currently. We're still treating, still transporting, making sure we're not missing anybody. We're working here with the Home Front Command to sweep all the floors, all the buildings, to make sure we don't miss anybody.
Was anybody pulled from the rubble at all, do you know?
Of course, yeah. So this scene was rather, it's funny to say, but rather an easy extract for us, for most of the patients. Of course, but the difference between this round of the Rising Lion and the other wars we've had in the past years is that the missiles here are way, way bigger. We're talking about a few 100 pounds of missiles. So the whole area, the whole scene is way more complex. So we have patients who are concussed, patients with smoke inhalation, burns. So we have to treat accordingly. It's not just one, stop the bleeding, pack the wound, and transport.
Yeah.
We have much more complex patients.
How many people were pulled from the rubble, would you say?
So less than 10, I can assume. Everything's so chaotic and hectic in the beginning.
Yeah.
I know the patients that I treated when we got here on scene were very close to the safe room, but afterwards, during treatment, I saw a few getting extracted out by Home Front Command and us.
Older community of people that live here, or is it mixed?
No, so the city and the area here is a family zone. You can also see it by the bystanders outside.
Yeah.
It's a mixed age.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Well, if you're joining us now on ILTV, it is just after 3 p.m. here in Israel, 8 a.m. in New York City. I'm Kalev Ben David, and just to bring you up on the headlines, early this morning during rush hour traffic, Israel was hit by a heavy rocket barrage from Iran, resulting in several casualty events in multiple locations across the country. Now, there were at least 7 impact sites, with Soroka Hospital in Beersheba suffering a direct hit. Fortunately, miraculously, the ward that was hit had been evacuated the night before, and there was only one minor injury there. Now, the IDF did identify between 20 and 30 missiles that were launched towards Israeli territory this morning, and most, but unfortunately not all, were intercepted. Now, so far, at least 23 people were reported injured. 3 of them were seriously in the strike in Holon. Now, in addition to Beersheba, as I mentioned, the other sites were in the Tel Aviv metropolitan area. In Holon, casualties were evacuated to the nearby Beilinson, Wilson, and Ichlab hospitals. Now, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu released a statement saying, quote, "This morning, Iran's terrorist tyrants launched missiles at Soroka Hospital in Beersheba and at a civilian population in the center of the country. We will exact the full price from the tyrants in Tehran." Now, also, as I mentioned, Soroka Medical Hospital suffering that direct hit. Now, all this is happening as Israel continues its airstrikes on Iran's key military and nuclear facilities, bombing the nuclear reactor in Arak, and carrying out further attacks on the uranium enrichment facility in Natanz. But Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said this morning that in response to the Israeli missile strike on Soroka Hospital, that Israel would now widen its air attacks to, quote, targets in order to remove the threats hanging over the state of Israel and to shake the regime of the Ayatollahs. Meanwhile, Israel is still awaiting a decision from U.S. President Donald Trump on whether he will order a direct U.S. strike on Iran. Now, Trump told reporters earlier, quote, "I may do it, I may not do it." Now, these latest comments came amid growing speculation that the U.S. could be on the verge of joining the Israeli offensive, possibly with an airstrike on the heavily fortified nuclear facility at Fordo. Trump said, "Nobody knows what I'm going to do, but it's not too late for Iran to give up its nuclear program." The U.S. president also added, quote, "It's very late to be talking. We may meet, but then referring to Israeli strikes on Iran, Trump said there's a big difference now between now and a week ago. What I want is Iran's unconditional surrender. This comes, as I said before, as Israel is widening its strikes on Iran, sites in Iran over the past 24 hours with planes hitting there in 60 fighter jets involved in waves of attacks against sites in Tehran. That ends this news broadcast, but stay with us on ILTV. We're back on the top of the hour with more news.